Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Tyler Oliver in our third episode of podcast. Tyler is a cybersecurity expert, product manager turned founder. Currently, he has his own product, Huntbase, where he's a CEO and founder. So, welcome, Tyler. Thanks for joining us. How are you doing today?
Good, Jerry. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to dive into the world of product.
Perfect, perfect. So, yeah, let's start with the questions I have for you today. So, for the start, for the opening, could you tell us a bit more about your experience in cybersecurity space and actually your journey to become a product leader from the cybersecurity space, sort of?
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, first off the bat, I think my journey to become a product leader is still ongoing. I'll let you know when I get there. But I think yeah, I started my career 20 years ago in the IT world, tinkering with computers, but then quickly fell into the cyberspace. I met someone in Vancouver that was in a gang task force in the police, and they introduced me to this concept of forensics. And my background is kind of started in that digital forensic space, and then I had the opportunity to go and work at a company called Mandiant doing incident response, so essentially investigating companies that have been breached. And doing that for years was great. It was grab your bag at 5 o'clock, fly to wherever, and help companies recover. But that also led me to understand that there's a real need in the kind of product world to simplify that process. And so my first jump into product was probably not until I came to a company called Tanium, where I was working on their EDR and threat response products, so endpoint detection, endpoint software. And it's kind of evolved since then. My career since then has been heavily focused in the product world, but still very much in cybersecurity. And recently, about a year ago, I said, you know what, I think there's an opportunity here for me to kind of take some of my product knowledge, take some of my cybersecurity knowledge, and try and solve some more direct problems that I've seen friends and users experience in the threat hunting space. And that's what brought me to start this business, Huntbase. But I would say, I don't know if there is a traditional route into the product world, product management, or whatever your title within the product space is. I don't think mine's necessarily traditional, but I appreciate it for its strengths and flaws as well. So yeah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I see. And what do you like about being a product manager? Why did you kind of get into it? Like, what was the kind of leap from being a cybersecurity expert to becoming a product leader?
I think it was a natural transition. When I was working at Tanium in the research space for their product, I was regularly going out and speaking with users and teaching and training users on how to do investigations, but also how to use the product. And I was seeing those users' pain points firsthand. I was seeing their struggles with features or with the product direction, and feeding that back into the product team. And in fact, a lot of my colleagues that were on my team transitioned into the product space, and because it's kind of that natural move of, hey, we're already digesting a lot of user input, and we understand the product and the technical problem space well. So it married really well into that move. And I think that's kind of the exact same route I ended up taking, although there was a period of time there where I was kind of holding on to that desire to stay as a cyber practitioner solely and only. But over the years, I've realized there's benefits to having both of those skill sets. I then really jumped into the product management space when I went to a threat intelligence company and was building out products there. And I would say that was a lot of trial by fire learning. It was a very ground up business. And I think that's the first time you and I met, was when I was at a company called Eclectic IQ. And that's where I was, hiring the team and trying to figure out, what are the features we needed on a greenfield operation? What is the actual product strategy and vision for that product? And learning very much the core competencies of product management while being a product manager was an interesting exercise.
I see. Great. I guess it's always trial and error at the beginning, but kind of crystallizes.
I think, I think talking in the years since, I've gotten in the product space, talking to a lot of product managers, there is a very understood, maybe everyone accepts trial by fire for every problem because you're faced with so many different problems. And then there's also a massive imposter syndrome. But I also saw that in cybersecurity as a general issue, and it's something that, each person has to overcome. But because I don't think there is a traditional route for product management, it's not like becoming a doctor or a lawyer. It's a bit about, finding the right person who knows how to solve problems, who knows how to take feedback, who knows how to digest it. And these are general skill sets that a lot of people in a lot of different industries have. But finding them all melded together and then applying to the product space. A lot of people don't think they have that or don't believe they have it. And then you get this kind of as I said, imposter style syndrome, but also you're dealing with every day is a different day, which is also what I like about product management. Like every day, and even now trying to get a business off the ground, it's very similar. Like every day there's something different, whether it's an outage or a user, a customer has a massive issue that they want a new feature for, or it's, hey, the business is taking a completely different strategic direction, or, these are all falling into the product manager realm, which makes the job really, really interesting.
I agree. Well, that's interesting. Maybe I will sound uneducated now, but actually, can you study product management even? Is there some university for is it a program that you can study as a bachelor studies or master studies? I know you can study business or engineering.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know actually. I'll have to find out.
I'd imagine so. I mean, I think it's also it's a great tangent to cybersecurity. Like 10, 15 years ago, there were very few programs in cybersecurity. And I am just as on the topic of education from a higher education perspective for product managers. I will say I'm just as uneducated. I do not know. I've not actively looked out. Is there an undergrad degree in product management? Probably because I don't want to go back to university. But I imagine if there isn't, it's very similar to cybersecurity, where it's probably started to show up in certain places, and in a couple of years it'll be something. But I think the other thing that one should never discount is finding the right person with that mindset, that kind of investigative and kind of customer focused mindset, and problem solving mindset in a domain that your product is being developed in is not to be undervalued. And I think your last speaker, Gabriel, mentioned something similar. So I definitely agree there. But yeah, I hope there's every opportunity for education to advance, and maybe product management as a study is something, but it is also kind of a general businesses study. I don't know. So.
All right. Yeah, I'll take a look for sure. Right. So, today I actually wanted to speak about breadth of automation and integration solutions in the market for cybersecurity product vendors, and how iPaaS vendors play a role, because I think you have a interesting opinion on that, and you have a great experience in researching these products. That actually Appmixer, our product, is also part of these this kind of segment. We've got now maybe for listeners out there that don't know all these abbreviations, we have iPaaS, which is integration platform as a service. We've got embedded iPaaS that Appmixer is in that field, which is embedded integration platform as a service. Obviously, we've got unified API. We've got SOAR. Now we're getting to this, like when we talk cybersecurity, these kind of automation and like tools in that sector have their own abbreviations, like SOAR, which is security orchestration, automation and response, and SIEM, security information and event management. So what else is there, and like how do you see that from your overview when you were looking for a product for some of your products, like when you were looking for platforms for some of your cybersecurity products where you were product manager? Was this kind of confusing, or like what did you find out?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the confusing thing definitely hit right away. You mentioned a few of the acronyms. I'll add another one or two. There's BPA software, business process automation software. That's something that I think some of like the big four consultancies have been leveraging quite heavily. And if you go out and you just say, "Hey, I need integrations in my product," you can go anywhere from open source things that have nothing to do with iPaaS, like Apache Camel, which is an integrations framework, all the way through to Tines, which is a very low code, security focused SOAR. And there's a million places in between, especially as a security product vendor. So I spent a little bit of time, and maybe worth explaining a little bit why. So the products that I've been working on for the last several years have been heavily reliant on integrations, especially in security. I mean, security from the perspective of what I've been building is almost like a data science problem. And we have to go out and get data from a bunch of different tools and be able to reach out and touch things. So if there's a security incident on your Windows device, I need to have an integration to be able to pull that incident or reach out to your Windows device and do something. Or if there's an incident on your security incident management system, you mentioned a SIEM, I need to have an integration that allows me to pull that data in and then reach back out and make changes on that. And this has existed whether I'm building an XDR product or building what I'm building today. So from a research perspective, I looked at a lot of different vendors. Originally, I think when I was maybe not naive, but early on in my research, I was actually looking at a product called Node-RED, which is actually a node-based solution developed by IBM. It's not embeddable, but it does that flow-based programming that I think users are very comfortable with. And that opened a little bit of a can of worms. Now, I've been using that product for years for home automation, but also, it's heavily used in the enterprise space. And as I started to look at that, and as I started to see things like SOAR products coming onto the market, I was saying, wait a minute, these are very, very similar. Now one is, got a security name attached to it, but they're very similar kind of solutions in terms of what they're trying to solve for. And then when I was at Eclectic, I needed to find a solution to put into our product so that we could integrate quickly. Because developing integrations, as you know, is quite cumbersome, but also maintaining them. And that's when I really cracked the can open and saw, hey, wait, there's like hundreds of different products with different categories and names that claim to solve the problem you want to solve. Now, for me, the solution was an embedded iPaaS because I needed to be able to embed the automation builder and things like that. For others, it might be something completely different. There's I think obviously Appmixer sits in that embedded iPaaS and general iPaaS space. And I'm happy to talk a little bit more, the difference. But there's also, I looked at integrations for data ingestion, which is slightly different. So this is like, hey, I need to pull data from a bunch of different tools and be able to call out. And that's where I started to come across products like WorkOS and Merge.dev. And through the years, I've learned a few others. These are Merge and maybe less so Merge, but Certainly a new company called Lean.dev is very security focused. Like they're essentially creating these like standardized APIs, which I think is going to be the future of integrations, not at the iPaaS level, but more at like what can you ingest from, is kind of creating these like almost industry specific normalized APIs to help with integrations and maintenance. But again, that's again can be claimed as an integration solution, but certainly not what we were looking for. And so a lot of it was just weeding through the noise and trying to find. I mean, it took me a while to find the iPaaS acronym, to be honest, because it wasn't in my repertoire of knowledge. But I got there in the end. And yeah, through the years, I've been keeping an eye on the space. So.
Mm, mm. I
don't know if that answered your question.
Do you know how? Yeah. It's. I think we're getting there. It's like, so how many tools do you think you've seen when like, or how have you like filtered down what these tools, like how have you kind of go about that research there?
Yeah, so I think we did I've done a bake-off a few times, but before I even got to the bake-off, it was just understanding what's the user need. So, hey, what's the user need, especially with an early stage product, what is like going to have the most impact early on? And then using that to define what products should we explore or should we build it? I think that's one of the big ones is like the build buy conversation. But I've seen what happens when you try and build integrations and maintain them. So, go into that later on. But so we essentially sat down, we did an evaluation of, hey, we need to find the ability to integrate security products first off the bat, and ideally have some off-the-shelf integrations for those products because they were high on our list. If not, we should be able to build those integrations quite easily into that platform. Secondly was our users, especially in the security domain, are highly technical. And so they want to, very often there's an ask if you're going to allow for automation, allow for us to manipulate and manage that automation. So is there an opportunity to explore that and expose that to our users in the longer term? And a few other security focused features. One that came up for me as I started to look at these was, what is embeddability mean? I think there's a lot of embedded iPaaS or even just integration systems that are simply, hey, here's an iframe, throw it and throw the iframe up, and your users can be pivoted to our application and manage the integrations, and that's it. But we had a few different needs, and I still have that today with Huntbase around wanting to truly embed it, wanting to be able to access the integration context so that we can leverage those integrations outside of the integration platform as well. And there's only a select few that offer kind of like a software level or SDK level integration. And so that started to pop into the list of requirements. I think we also have an issue in security. I don't necessarily agree that it's always a problem, but things like iframes have always been maybe a little bit more cautious for some users to accept. They, not saying well implemented are not, but iframes can be vulnerable. Things like cross-site scripting and whatnot, which starts to raise further scrutiny. And I was trying to avoid that. Right or wrong, I think it was definitely something that was brought up in conversation. And so seeing the ability to kind of embed the solution, this is where kind of Appmixer popped in the picture of, hey, I can actually give this, the engineering team can actually embed this very deeply in the product, which isn't always a bad thing, especially when you're building kind of a very rapid, kind of heavily integrated solution. So, there's a whole process around baking off products that we went into as well. But, before we even got there, we needed to down select from hundreds of different solutions and do it very quickly within a couple, days or a week or so, to get to the point where you can say, hey, 4 vendors, let's see what they can do. So.
I see. Let's maybe step here for a moment, like that iframe versus SDK. So, from your position, like the SDK was the choice because you could integrate that more deeply into your product. If we should like, can we explain that a bit? Like, if you're explaining that to someone who is not really technical, like what's the difference there, and why do you prefer actually using SDK for embedding instead of iframes?
Yeah. So, I mean, there were certainly a lot of this went to the engineering team. Now, I'd like to think I'm fairly technical, but a lot of a lot of these decisions go to design and engineering, and having the SDK allows for a little bit more flexibility in customization and design. But then also from the iframe perspective, this came down to we wanted to eventually expose the workflow builder and that kind of thing to our end users. And doing that in an iframe model raised a few concerns on kind of, do we want a big portion of our product as just an iframe into another solution? Is there a way to kind of embed this directly in the application itself? And that's where, it was kind of by chance that I even learned that Appmixer had an SDK. So that helped. That helped in the engineering conversation. I think it's also maybe something that's slightly more unique to security and kind of this security mindset. But we were just generally trying to avoid the iframe approach. Now, I know there's security products out there that don't take issue to that, and I think that's also stuff that at least some of them are trying to get away from. But it's a long journey to go through that if you haven't started with kind of that SDK approach.
Okay. I think it's
I mean, on that, like as I said before, oh, sorry, Jerry. Just on that, the iframe approach, like it's not that it's a bad approach. It's almost the industry or security users that are familiar with kind of security vulnerabilities see it as a potential vulnerability, but in reality, it's just another risk. And also, if it's implemented well, it's not a risk, or the risk is reduced to zero, I guess. So I just want to be clear. It's not that all iframes are bad. It's that they just have this kind of bad taste.
I see. Totally agree. When you're looking, so when you go to a new company and join a new company, or like currently you're building Huntbase, like, and if you're choosing again a right product for embedded integrations and embedded workflow automation, are there some other features that now, after your research of those tens of products, are there some other features you would be looking for in such products?
Yeah, I mean, I think over the years I've done this kind of eval from a few different perspectives. So being at a larger business with a budget and the ability to kind of build integrations themselves versus being at a greenfield within a business where there's at least budget to bring on board and evaluate solutions, versus where I am now, where it's it's a time problem, but also a money problem. I need to figure out how do I integrate with at least a small select group of products quickly so that I can take the product to market. Each one of those has completely different challenges when determining what to buy or what to build. So I'll kind of maybe start with the, hey, imagine you're at a small business or a product business, and you're looking at evaluating these products. I think we took the right approach in terms of looking for what can we easily customize, what can we easily add new integrations on top of, but what can we get into the product within a couple of sprints to get the first integrations out the door, but gives us a longer runway, say 6 months plus, where we can start to expose other capabilities or add additional integrations quickly. And then budget wise, budget's never not a concern, but it was less of a concern than say it is right now, where there is no budget. So right now, as a startup, I need to build quickly to get something into our first set of customers' hands. But because I'm building a product that's heavily integrated into other solutions, I need to find an integration solution that I can trust and build on top of. And my evaluation up to this point has been very different. So it's been very much either the open source perspective or building myself at a small number. And again, that's entirely just because this is a bootstrapped small business. I think longer term, there's no way I would build those integrations. And I find it really interesting from a startup perspective, like where I'm at. Investors even bring it up. So when you talk to investors and they say, hey, what's your product? And as soon as I get into hey, it integrates with other products, they're now looking at, wait a minute, sorry, it integrates. Are you building those integrations? It makes some investors very nervous if you turn around and say, yeah, I am building those integrations, because building and maintaining integrations is not a small task. It's not, oh, I built one and it's fine, or two or three. It's a snowball effect, and maintaining not just those existing integrations, but especially with larger enterprise customers, you may have one customer that requires one version of an integration or one version of an application. And there's a whole deployment and maintenance problem that faced. And I find it interesting that investors are attuned to that now. And so they've raised that question of, hey, are you building these yourself? Are you maintaining them yourself? This is a risk that we may or may not want to accept. So it's an interesting business kind of view that I had up until, talking to my first investors. I hadn't even considered something that people realized outside of the product and engineering space.
Mm-hmm. That's good to hear. Yeah, that's valuable. I think like that it propagates that like even investors now think about this, that like you're just creating additional burden on your development team when you can use something that is kind of ready out of the box and just adjust it. It just gives you a different pace. All right, well, thank you for sharing this experience. I think it's a nice. I think you've outlined a nice kind of sort of almost like a step-by-step guide on what you should be looking at when choosing the integration and workflow automation platform for your product. Any closing remarks on that part of our interview?
I need a big.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
I need a big decision matrix to go through, but I think it's like any other decision. The more information you have, maybe the easier that decision is to make, but sometimes it's harder to weed through the noise. But yeah, hopefully this has been helpful.
Oh yeah, there's this kind of graph where like you're doing the research and suddenly you start thinking that you know everything and you can now decide for plan, then it just goes down and you're like, oh, I understood the problem, and now it's actually become even more difficult, right? And so yeah, I think if you come up with some decision tree on that, like how to go about that choice, I'll be happy if you share that with us, and I'll definitely make sure to share it with our listeners. So yeah, thank you. That this has been helpful. As always, I've got my favorite fives for the end of the interview. So the first question is, what is your number one challenge at work currently?
Time is definitely, it's a big challenge, but especially when building a startup, it's just finding the time to stop and build, and especially coming from the product management mindset of you want to take in as much feedback and kind of push it off to kind of develop. Having to wear both those hats has been both the taking in the feedback from users and also developing the product at the same time, as well as selling it has been the biggest challenge. I did like Gabriel's one last week or last session, which was Slack. Thankfully, my Slack is quite quiet, but I can 100% agree with that from a kind of when I'm in a larger enterprise as a product manager. But yeah, it's also a time problem.
Exactly. Yeah, and I guess your Slack will get pretty crowded once you actually get some investors aboard and and you start hiring some folks to help you push Huntbase. Okay, if you could choose one key metric, like the North Star, that defines your success as a product leader, what would that be?
I think there's probably I'll say two here. One is less of a measurable metric. I mean, it can be measurable. Is customer enjoyment. So there is kind of the net promoter score kind of thing. But anytime I ever heard a customer say, I enjoy using the product, or it doesn't even have to be direct. It almost like it fills a little bit of a joy energy bank in me. It's like, all right, yeah, we hit the nail on the head. Now that doesn't mean they enjoyed it, so they bought it or whatever. It's there's a little bit of that, like, okay, we got it right. And especially in when I'm building in security products, like I know how much of a struggle it is to work in high stress security environments. And if there's a product that they're using, they're like, yeah, you know what, this is like the little thing I enjoy using. That's really nice. Another key metric, I think, to me is certainly around how many customers are regularly speaking on your behalf. So we used to do user conferences and things like that. But how many of those customers that use your product are willing, and maybe these two things are intertwined, but are willing to go out and actually talk about your product to other people, because that tells you that you're probably doing something right, because they don't have anything invested other than the fact that they're a user and maybe their business bought the product. So yeah.
Okay. Great. Now, how do you collect feedback from your customers? Do you have processes and tools that you use for that?
Yeah. So I've seen the gambit of this. Right now, my process is very physically driven. So reaching out to my user base, going to technical conferences, but this is also because we're early stage. We want to get as much of that direct user feedback. I say user, it's potential user feedback at this stage. And then with our design partners, it is very much kind of weekly, or bi-weekly catch-ups, just to say, hey, what's working, what's not. But there's a small number, so it's easier to manage. Now, when I was working at organizations where the user base was much larger, we had a lot of really good data points that we could pull from, whether it be quarterly business reviews, or whether it be the kind of face-to-face customer conversations. I'll say this: Tanium had one of the most stringent kind of ways of getting user feedback in from customers. So anytime a sales conversation, or a customer success or a technical account manager had a conversation, it was reported, it was logged, it was sent back into our CRM, and then we were able to, as product managers and product people, we were able to reach into that system and pull those data points. And there was even someone whose sole task was to make sure that those notes were fed in from every business meeting. And then I've really liked at some organizations where, some organizations where they take a lot of data in from things like feature flagging software like Launch Darkly or Pendo, feeding that into a data lake and doing almost kind of data science on how users are using the application. That was a really good passive method for gaining user feedback, because we can, you could say, oh, look, they are heavily leveraging this portion of the product, or they're not, or it looks like they're struggling here, and so you without having to interact with the user directly, you're getting feedback, because it's not that you don't want to interact with users. You absolutely, it's like the best part of product management. It's that users are busy. Their job daily is not necessarily to use your product or to give you feedback. So how can you do it in a kind of a less intrusive way? And some of those products that embed themselves on top of your application to provide things like click-through walkthroughs or feature flagging also provide a lot of good data points that you can leverage in that passive feedback process.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, which were some of the specific products that you have experience in that field? You mentioned them.
Yeah, so Pendo is one. And the other is Launch Darkly, but there are several. I mean, I think this market of kind of user experience or digital experience platforms or whatever you want to call it is exploding. Launch Darkly is slightly different, but like there's a fair few that you go to a website and it'll kind of give you a guided click through of the application, but then it also can provide feedback on how are users using certain features in the product. Likewise with Launch Darkly and some of those feature flagging softwares. I think there's the immediate need for those products that people, product managers and engineers go after, which is I want to guide users. But then there's a lot of passive data that you can leverage, sending it into a data lake or whatever that you can then start to harness and figure out trends within your app. Now, you can also spend a million years just going through data and trying to look for patterns. But if you have the right person on it or the right people, even say a data scientist looking at that output, you may be able to see things that would have other guys gone, amiss, especially if your user base isn't a couple hundred people. If it's tens of thousands or tens of millions, you're never going to talk to all your users, right? So.
Mm-hmm. I also liked what you mentioned about like Tanium logging all the interviews with the customers, and so that was like the sales and customer success team. They had some kind of list of required questions for each such touch point, or how
no, it was less, and it was less stringent. It wasn't Tanium it wasn't recording every customer conversation. It was more the outcomes of those conversations and the outcomes of the state, the health of the conversations, just so that, if I walked into a meeting and I hadn't seen that customer in a while, I immediately had context. Or if I'm building a feature for something, I immediately have that context that, hey, the last 10 times we've spoken to that customer, they want that feature. It's not just a splash in the pan of like, oh yeah, 5 months ago it was mentioned in passing. So it was less stringent in the fact that it was like, hey, ask these 5 questions. More just make sure that you feed back that like reinforce the feedback loop from any customer conversations. And I think that's something that most businesses strive for, is anytime they have feedback, it goes back to the right people. But I will say, I think that the team over there did a very good job at that, and it's something I hope to continue to replicate elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. Nice. All right. Well, we touched on that briefly in the previous part of the interview. Build versus buy. How do you decide now? So even investors kind of have a say in this territory now.
I think investors have a say in everything. It's whether or not you have to listen at times. But yeah, I think just to close out on the build versus buy, like it's looking at what's ahead of you, at least short term. Does building make things better or worse? And don't underestimate the amount of work involved with building and specifically maintaining integrations. It's become easier and easier every day to build an integration. I mean, more products that have open API specs and are well documented. Building an integration for a product at a point in time is becoming easier, which is good. The problem is it's a moving target and it's a moving set of products. Are you going to end up having to spend more resources and even build entire teams just to maintain those integrations? And also, can you be trusted to do it securely? I've seen certain, especially as I meet more startup vendors, like startup vendors are fast and quick and they're trying to build, as quickly as they can. And especially with integrations, are they securely handling those integrations? Do they have, the knowledge to do that? And this is one of the benefits of buying an iPaaS is, hey, you can kind of offload a little bit of that, security and, assuming you trust the iPaaS vendor, and there's a level of trust there. But there's a lot that goes into that build versus buy, and every day you're going to question it and wonder if you did the right thing. But I think there's my approach would be, for the most part, if you have the money and you're going long term with your integration strategy, buying into an ecosystem is not a bad approach.
I see. It also kind of gets connected with the last question I have for you. You mentioned that Huntbase is like heavily integrated product. So what role do integrations with third-party products play in your product?
Yeah, so I mean, I probably could have opened with this, but Huntbase itself is a threat hunting and security operations tool. So allowing security operators to reach out and touch all of the different business tools, infrastructure, and security tools that they have, and being guided in responding to threats. So right off that kind of 2-sentence description, hopefully it's clear how heavily involved integrations are. We have to be able to reach out to, security products like Splunk, like Tanium, like others, but then also be able to reach out to business products like Salesforce or Figma or, Google Docs to be able to pull in context or make changes. And so you can quickly see how this snowballs into an integrations problem. We will never be able to maintain the millions of integrations. But what I think we've done is taken kind of like a tiered approach, which is, we have tier 1 integrations, which are, heavily either customized or developed by us. Then we have tier 2, which is leveraging, a third-party service or a library that we work with. And then we have tier 3, which is the most light touch, which is, all right, just the basic, 1 or 2 calls where, it's not something we'll maintain, but we can get data from it. And that's worked out so far. But I don't know how many businesses take that tiered approach, but I would recommend it to others. The short answer is a lot of our business is built on integrations. And, but then I also think there's a lot of other kind of strengths that we have around the security and hunting space that we can leverage our integration partners or platforms to kind of solve the SOC problem a little bit differently.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining us for today's episode. I think we have a kind of full of very interesting ideas, and thank you for sharing your experience in your research around these tools. And good luck with Huntbase, and take care. Thank you.
Thanks, Jerry. I really appreciate it. It was a really great conversation, and I think people can always find me on Huntbase, and I'm always happy to talk about kind of, especially in the security domain, the integration problem space. I find it really, really interesting. So